All right, hello everybody, and my name is Darren Hood. I am what a lot of people like to refer to as an OG in UX. I've been doing UX since before it was called UX, dating all the way back to 1995. We were all information architects and such, and interaction designers way back then. But let's go ahead and dive into the subject today. I'll talk about me in a little bit, give you a little bit more of an intro. But the title today of my talk is the UX Cycle of Excellence. And again, a little bit about me. 27 plus years. Currently, I've got a master's, a UX related master's degree from Syracuse University. Also have a UX related master's degree from Kent State University. That's my beautiful wife, Angela. Personally, I'm into photography. My wife and I love cats. We have four. I love bicycling and I love bowling. That's my first sanctioned 300 game that you see there. And I regularly speak at a lot of events, hence the World Usability Day logo there. My professional footprint is quite large. This is not even all the different companies, projects, and organizations that I've worked with and for over the course of my career. But I want people to understand the what's behind a lot of the things that I'm saying here today. That it's not about just whimsically presenting anything. It's not about just providing opinion. It's about providing expert opinion. And the information I'm about to share with you is things that I've learned, things that have been gauged over the course of my career. So when it comes to UX, as is the case, this is the junior track. Many of you have already got your first job, or you're in your first couple of jobs. You're in your first 2-3 years or so, and you find out you're still getting your bearings. You're finding out that UX is about more than what originally was presented to you. There's a lot to this, a lot of moving parts, and even when you're at a senior, even when you're growing, even when you're at the 5 year at the mid-level stage, when you're in senior territory, which is 8 to 10 years, and principal and lead, which is beyond that, a lot of people still have questions. How do I guide myself? How do I grow? How do I mature in my own career? What direction do I go? How do I take care of this stuff? I graduated from a class, I graduated from a program. Where do I go? There are a lot of questions, and that's where I came up. This question I come across a lot. I mentor people all over the world. I'm a professor at 6 universities, by the way. Didn't bother mentioning that, but I'm a professor at 6 universities. So I talk to people that are up and coming in UX all the time. And what I devised and what I'm going to take the time to talk to you about today is what I call the UX cycle of excellence. This is a way that a person can manage your career, whether you're just getting into UX or whether you've been in for a few years and you're one of the people asking the questions and you keep sort of running into a brick wall and trying to figure out, how do I do this? How do I do that? What are the steps for getting better at what I do? I've got 7 steps, and I'm going to go over these one by one as a brief overview. Step 1, properly define the discipline. And by the way, I'm going to spend more time on some of these than others. Step 2, embrace UX's foundational tenets. Step 3, evaluate your current state, which is interesting because that's a major part of doing UX work. We're constantly evaluating our current state. Step 4, identify any knowledge and skill gaps. We have to face these things head on. And again, I'll get into this in more detail in a bit. Step 5, build towards excellence, a constant effort. Step 6, commit to personal maintenance. You're not going to grow unless you are deliberate about it. And then step 7, which ironically is, I venture to say it's the most important because it's one that I find lacking, that a lot of people don't have. But again, we'll speak to that in more detail later. I don't want to get ahead of myself here. So these are the 7 steps. Let's go over each one of them one by one. So number 1, properly define the discipline. If you're going to have a viable career in user experience, one of the first things that a person must do is have an understanding of what you're in. Understand what UX is. And interestingly, a lot of people say they either struggle to define the discipline, they oversimplify the discipline. A lot of people, it's actually interesting to watch someone sometime try to define UX and watch the look on their face, as some people haven't had this experience yet where they have to define what UX is, and they struggle. They struggle, and it can change depending upon who your audience is. Who is it that you're defining user experience for? You'll find that you have to define it different ways. And no, it is not fitting, as some people would say, oh, act like you're talking to a 6-year-old. Folks, it's not going to work. If you're talking to a C-suite person and you try to define UX like you're talking to a 6-year-old, that's going to be a very short conversation. So I highly advise that we learn how to properly define the discipline. And in order to do that, one of the ways we have to arrive at that point is, let's understand what UX is not. And let's go over a few points, some things that people do present as UX. And this is going to ruffle some feathers. I know the name of the event this week, but I'm going to challenge some people, even in light of that, because it is something that does hurt us. So I want to call these things out. UX's main concern is not aesthetics. We are not here to make things look pretty. That is not our goal. A lot of people think that. A lot of stakeholders think that. A lot of people in leadership think that. And a lot of people that are doing UX work think that. We are not the people who focus solely on the presentation layer of an experience. And so we need to understand that. UX is not UI. It is not UI. UI is a subset of UX, but it is possible to do UX and never touch the UI. It is possible to do UI and never use one UX principle. UX and UI are not interchangeable. So when you see UX/UI, that is actually something that is to our detriment, and we need to learn to separate them. They are not one and the same. They are not interchangeable. UX is not just one thing. UX is actually, as you're going to see here shortly, UX is actually an umbrella term that is referring to a lot of different methods, methodologies, techniques, and deliverables that we put together in order to devise an experience to optimize the sweet spot, find the sweet spot between business needs, user needs, and any constraints that we're dealing with, whether they're technological, time, or anything of that sort. We have to find the sweet spot between the three. So UX is basically a strategic operation. And a lot of people don't realize that. You can't just jump in Figma and do UX. It simply doesn't work that way. Some people say that UX is a mindset. It is not. It is not. As mentioned, it is a strategic undertaking. That's really what UX is about. You're going to find all these different methods and methodologies and techniques and deliverables and find out which ones best suit the initiative you're working on now. And when you work on another initiative, guess what? It can easily change. Matter of fact, it likely will change, which is why you can't templatize UX work. It's not going to work that way. You change the stakeholders, it changes. You change the users, it changes. And so it's not just a mindset. It's quite a bit more than that. UX is not design thinking, and design thinking isn't UX. Design thinking was a way that someone tried to describe UX in a different way, and some people ran off and started doing that. And for some people, design thinking replaces UX altogether. But folks, UX and the things that people do with design thinking were around a long time before design thinking. Design thinking was around before UX was. It existed going back to the 1970s. So these things are also not interchangeable, just like UX, UI. They're not interchangeable, and we need to understand that. And the more we understand that as a discipline wide, then we'll represent the discipline better, because there's a lot of people we encounter that don't understand what UX is. So if we don't define it accurately, it's going to actually create problems for them. And as people cross-pollinate across companies, across events, across conversations during meetups, whatever it might be, it'll make it a lot easier. When we are on the same page, it helps us to communicate and to represent the discipline better. UX is not UX if it does not include insights from actual users. And I've been delivering this talk for the last 3 years. One thing that is new today that wasn't a year ago is something like Chat GPT. And You see the posts everywhere where people are saying you can use ChatGPT to actually represent talking to users. No, you can't. uh, if you're not including including or talking to actual users in the delivery of your work, you're falling short of what UX work is. What people need to stop trying to shortcut. We can't shortcut the work. We can't templatize the work. We can't overgeneralize the work. We can't oversimplify the work, and then the work maintains its integrity or its value. So these are all at the definition level. When we have the proper concepts in place with regard to it, then we're in a better position. And I mentioned this once, but I'll read it again. UX refers to the set of methods and techniques that are used to find the sweet spot between user goals, business goals, and various types of constraints. So let's keep it that way. So let us properly define the discipline. Some people who've been doing UX for 3 or 4 or 5 years have not reached this point. So if you want to engage with the UX cycle of excellence, you have to make sure that you double back. Look at how you define it today. Look at how, because if you're doing it, fine, go back, change it. We've all done things over the course of our career that we had to go back and retool. This is something that a person can go back and retool. It'll get you on a more profitable, a more beneficial, and a more manageable path. Step 2, embrace UX's foundational tenets. Now, I mentioned that I was going to show you some things in a bit. This is when people ask me what UX is, depending upon where they are, I'm either going to talk about this or I'm going to find my way referring back to it. I call this the landscape of UX. Sometimes I call it the 4 pillars of UX. And those 4 pillars are heuristics and usability, information architecture, which a lot of people flat out overlook and are not familiar with at all today, which is a crime, but we won't talk about that at length today. We'll talk about that during another talk. UX research, which is far more vast than people think it is, and it simply is not about asking people what they think about something. There is a book, The Universal Design Methods, that the latest version of the book mentions 125 methods, methodologies, and deliverables associated with UX research alone. We tend to only use about 20 to 25 of them maximum in UX, but they're still there. And the larger your toolbox is, the more you have available to you when you're going to do the work. So a lot larger than what people make it out to be, isn't it? UX research is very large. It's quite diverse. And then the 4th pillar is that of interaction and interface design. That's where UI lives. So it's, again, UI is a subset of UX, but these are the things that make up user experience. These are the tools that we can pull from at almost any given time, those strategical elements that we can use to achieve a proper or desirable user experience today. So we need to be aware of it and embrace these tenets. These are the things that make up UX. These are the things that make UX what it is. It's not design thinking over here, and it's not, you can't put the little template over here, and it's not just research. It's not this little thing over there. And by the way, each of those 4 pillars or tenets are all related. They all overlap. They all work together to drive the user experience. So, by the way, here's a little tidbit I don't normally talk about here, but did you know that specializations did not exist in UX prior to 2011? We were all UX designers, UX architects, information architects, interaction designers, but no matter what your title was, you did everything back at that day and time. These specializations didn't come about until recently, and organizations are starting to move back towards looking for generalists, people who do everything. So don't be deceived by titles, because a title doesn't necessarily represent who someone is or what they do. But if you are a specialist today, I'd highly advise you, as juniors, this is the junior track, I highly advise you start to use the UX cycle of excellence to start picking up on and learning more about those other areas that you're not that skilled in now, because the broader your skill set is in UX, the more valuable you're going to be to an organization and to the discipline at large. Specialists are narrow and generalists are broad. And if someone says, well, I remember that old saying that you don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. And truth is, that's actually not what the saying says. And the person who made that saying, the person who made that statement, was actually encouraging you to be a jack of all trades. He wasn't discouraging people being a jack of all trades. You see, he said it's better to be a jack of all trades than a master of none, is what he was getting at. And so when you look at the business world, it is better. As a matter of fact, the more you know about information architecture and usability and interaction design principles, the better researcher you can be, since that's the hot area today. The better researcher you can be, and you can use that knowledge to inform the design of your UX research. So let's keep that in mind today. Step 3, evaluate your current state. Where are you today? What is your strong suit today? What areas, think about that illustration I just showed you. What areas are places where you would like to grow? What areas, what skills are listed in that illustration? And reach out to me, I'll send it to you. I send it all the time. People ask for me, that's being used all over the world. If you look at that and you may identify some things, you know what? I need to get better at semiotics. I need to get better at usability. I've never used heuristics to drive my work. If you are faced that, evaluate your current state. I'm strong here, I'm mid-level here, and I could really use some improvement here. Be honest with yourself, because when you identify these states, knowing your current state is critical to your well-being, because it helps to facilitate the strategy in managing your own personal UX maturity. Next, you're going to identify those knowledge and skill gaps. And that might be, it might sound a little redundant, but you understand your current state. But in understanding your current state, you need to see, here's what I lack, here's where I need to grow, and even areas where you might have certain knowledge. You might be decent or pretty good in certain areas. You might grade yourself high. Someone else may grade you high. It doesn't mean that you won't find knowledge and skill gaps. And truth be told, a lot of times, we never arrive. A lot of times people think that they arrive. I learned everything I need to learn in 3 years. No, you didn't. I've been doing it for 28 and I'm still learning, and you'll always be learning. And there's always areas. For me, a knowledge and skill gap for me is I've never been able to do any work on augmented reality. I haven't done that yet. That's a knowledge and a skill gap for me with 28 years of experience. I've never done any IVR work or interactive voice response work. That's a knowledge and a skill gap. It's not something that will impact, the IVR work does not impact my current job, but the augmented reality in the not too distant future could easily do that. And if that's the case, then I want to look at ways to build myself up so that I will be a more, wrestling how I want to say this, I want to put myself in a position where I can optimize my potential to bring value to my organization. And always remembering that we always represent the discipline, no matter who we are and where we are and what we're doing at any given time. So know your knowledge and skill gaps. Again, another means of devising the strategy for personal growth. When you recognize where you need to grow, when you recognize those knowledge and skill gaps, when you know what your current state is, you then continue to deliberately build towards excellence. You continue to do things that will help you to excel, and whether it's reading books. And by the way, I have a lot of book recommendation lists on uxuncensored.medium.com on my blog out there. I have to throw this out there because books are one of the greatest ways to learn concepts. You can look at something, read it, and you can go over and over again. You can take time to practice it. But please know that a lot of the older books are gold. So when you look at authors like Alan Cooper, when you look at Jesse James Garrett, when you look at Susan Weinschenk, when you look at Christina Wadke, when you Nathan Shetroff, when you look at people who haven't written books in some cases in quite some time, great UX books have a long shelf life. And these are original thought, great ways to lay sound foundations for our growth and management of our personal UX maturity in the discipline. and they're great ways to help build towards excellence, where they're clearly defining what excellence is regarding particular subjects. So I highly recommend that people tap into the older books. They're a lot better. Not a big fan of a lot of the newer books. We'll leave it at that today. Step 6, commit to personal maintenance. A lot of people want to have the UX jobs. They don't necessarily want to do the UX work. And they also don't necessarily want to commit to making themselves better. That's what the commitment to personal maintenance is. Make sure that you are committed to growing. Make sure you're committed to being better. Make sure you're committed to representing the discipline in a positive and a proper light, because it has to be deliberate. And if you're not deliberately committed, your personal UX maturity is not going to maintain itself. So we have to deliberately be about making sure that we're better and always paying attention to who we are and where we are on any given occasion. And then step 7, be patient with yourself. A lot of people are trying to achieve senior status overnight. You actually can't. I hate to have to be the one to bust the bubble, but I'd rather tell you and have you accept. And some people won't accept it. The fact that I'm saying this, they won't accept it, but it's the case. There was a day where you were not going to get the senior title unless you had 10 years. Today, they're giving out senior titles like they're cookies at a blood drive. So it's something that you have to be patient with yourself. Don't be in a hurry to grow. Don't be in a hurry to be a voice. Don't be in a hurry to be an influencer. I influence people, but I'm not trying. I just influence people. I'm not trying to be an influencer. You want to make it a point that you're patient. Slow and steady wins the race. Not trying to get somewhere fast. You get a name amongst people, but if you don't have what's necessary, you'll be in a bad way. So please be patient with yourself. When you don't get something right the first time, get up and do it again. Pick yourself up, get up and do it again. You don't have to arrive somewhere overnight, and you might as well go ahead and be patient because you never arrive anyway, and it's going to take a long time to arrive at the levels of expertise that are exemplary throughout the discipline. So be patient with yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself. It's a good and sound thing to do. So again, the 7 steps are: properly define the discipline, embrace the foundational tenets of UX, evaluate your current state, identify any knowledge and skill gaps that you have, no matter how small or great they might be. Make sure you build toward excellence. Make sure you deliberately do that, as well as committing to personal maintenance. Both must be deliberate. And please be patient with yourself. You don't have to get there overnight. You don't have to be a star overnight, even though some people are doing it. It's not a good example to follow. And the faster you rise, the faster you fall, frankly. So take your time, be patient. You'll be better off for it. So that's it for my talk, folks. So where can you find me? My podcast, The World of UX with Darren Hood. New episode came out today. Oh, by the way, you can find me anywhere podcasts are available. You can find me on Twitter under Darren Hood and under UX Uncensored. You can find me on, most people find me on LinkedIn. That's where most people connect to me. I've got somewhere in the vicinity of 25,000 people I'm connected to there. You can find me on YouTube.com. I have the UX Uncensored channel there. The Medium blog posts I mentioned there, as well as on Instagram. You can find me on UX Uncensored on Instagram. So that is it. And I don't know if we're doing Q&A now. We're just waiting for Q&A later.
We'll do the Q&A later, okay, after all the speeches. So thank you again for the great speech. And I gotta say, I'm looking forward to the next time somebody asks me what UX is. Okay. So I hope you'll join us for the Q&A, and thank you.
I'll be there.